Gunsmoke, starring James Arness as Matt Dillon.
Also starring the Second Amendment. We're going to go over facts and topics concerning the Second Amendment and what it actually is and how it's relevant and why it is actually our civil right.
The AR-15, as we've now seen from the last 3 mass shootings in America, Aurora, the shopping mall in Oregon, and now at Sandy Hook School, is the preferred choice of weapon for disturbed young men who want to commit mass atrocity. It can fire hundreds of bullets at rapid speed if you have the right magazines. The President of the United States has indicated he wants to ban assault weapons like this. What is your view?
I think we need to ban gun control laws that keep people from being able to protect themselves. The problem is not going to go away if we ban this or that gun. We've tried that. That doesn't work. Doesn't even work in England. You've had mass murders there. All over Europe there have been mass murders. The solution is for people to be able to defend themselves at the point of the crime and not wait for 20 minutes for the police to come after everybody's dead.
Mr. Pratt, was an absolute lie. The gun murder rate in countries like Britain or Germany or Australia, who've all suffered massacres many years ago of similar nature, they are 35 people killed a year. Your country is 12,000.
Your murder rate is lower than ours. That is true.
Lower? It's 35 against 12,000.
Your violent crime rate,
they had a massacre,
and they got rid of higher than ours, as is the violent crime rate in Australia. America is not the Wild West that you are depicting. We only have the problem in our cities and unhappily in our schools, where people like you have been able to get laws put on the books that keep people from being able to defend themselves. I honestly don't understand why you would rather have people be victims of a crime than be able to defend themselves. It's incomprehensible.
You're an unbelievably stupid man, aren't you?
As you can see, there are some who do not want us to have that civil right.
I've been doing a lot of research over the last few weeks because I'm disappointed with the data that I've been hearing on the news, the lack of respect for citing the source of that data, and the data I've been hearing from our politicians. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about accurate crime data, comparing that crime data to other countries, and why I think the data is different. So let's go over to FBI.gov and look at the Uniform Crime Reports. These are reports the FBI has been putting out every year for a long period of time. What I like about these is that these are unbiased and that the FBI does not advocate policy. I have a hard time accepting statistics from organizations that are actively lobbying Congress or in some way, shape, or form are trying to create policy. So let's look at the national data for violent crimes. Let's look at 1992. We'll see that in 1992 we had a violent crime rate of 757 per 100,000 and a murder rate of 9.3 per 100,000. Now let's fast forward to 2011. We have a violent crime rate now of 386 per 100,000. That is a 50% reduction in violent crime. We have a murder rate of 4.7 per 100,000. That is a 54% decrease. So what I find astonishing about these numbers is that nobody's talking about it. Our media isn't talking about it. Our politicians aren't talking about it. I mean, we have a 50% reduction in the violent crime rate over the last 20 years, yet no one is taking credit for it. I find it, pretty astonishing. It's unbelievable. Does it not play into their fear agenda? That, you're going to walk outside your front door and you're going to get shot? I can't make any sense of it. And so I started looking at the data even further to see that the crime we do have, where is it coming from? When you start to look a little more closely at the data, one thing you'll notice. In metropolitan areas where the population is greater than 250,000, our violent crime rate is double that of the national average. Our murder rate is double that of the national average as well. When looking at the data, you can pinpoint where the crime is coming from. I mean, you can dissect that data even further and look on a neighborhood level and see where the true trouble spots are. So I want to know, who's working on improving that? I mean, I notice that whenever you try to bring something like that up, it's always a redirect. You know, they want to compare America to another country. You know, America, you guys are always so much more violent than the British. I mean, are we? So let's go over and look at the Home Office. The Home Office keeps statistics that are comparable to the FBI. We're going to be looking at just England and Wales. Northern Ireland and Scotland keep their own crime stats, and those stats are slightly higher. So the England and Wales stats we're looking at will be just a little bit lower. And just to let you know, England and Wales has a population of 56 million. Northern Ireland and Scotland would be about an additional 10 million. So we're just looking at the population of England and Wales. So look at 2011. 2011, England and Wales had 762,000 violent crime offenses. That is a ratio of 1,361 violent crimes per 100,000. That is 3.5 times the violent crime rate of the United States. England and Wales does have a murder rate of 1.3. That is lower than the United States, but I think it's important to also look at the overall violent crime. And this is something that you don't hear on the news because they want to pick and choose their stats that meets their agenda. But when you clearly look at overall violent crime, the UK has much, much more than ours. So, less guns does not necessarily mean less violent crime. Now, they do have a lower murder rate, but there's a lot of other factors to look at when you're comparing country to country. And there's one important piece of data that is not taken into consideration. As I already mentioned before, the United States, the bulk of our violent crime is in very small pockets in large metropolitan areas. In the U.S., we have 186 metropolitan areas where the population is 250,000 or greater. In the UK, they have only 32 metropolitan areas where the population is 250,000 or greater. There's a lot of different data to take into consideration when comparing country to country, and honestly, we've just scratched the surface. But one thing I'll tell you is our media and our politicians have not been clear with this. They make it seem so much easier than it is. And there are a few things that we do know. Over the past 20 years, our violent crime rate in the U.S. has dropped by 50%. We know where the crime is coming from, metropolitan areas with population of over 250,000. We know that the UK has a higher violent crime rate than us. And we also know that we have 6 times more large metropolitan areas than they do. All of those factors have to be considered. I feel like our media isn't being honest about this. They're using the public airwaves to spread their agenda and wrong information, Pierce Morgan, as well as our politicians that are already introducing legislation before they even understand what the problem is, Dianne Feinstein. Did you know in 2011, out of the homicides that were caused by firearms, only 3.5% were caused by rifles, and the AR-15 is a subset of the rifle group? Way to pinpoint the problems. I'm going to tell you what. If they want to solve violent crime, they need to put on their boots and go to those neighborhoods and figure out how to improve the poverty level, how to create jobs, and how to improve the education system. That is how you're going to reduce the violent crime in those neighborhoods.
None other than CNN jumps on the bandwagon, showing Eric and Dylan after the shooting at Columbine, and then they say, hey, we need to get rid of the guns. Now, let me ask you a question, America. When a crime is committed, does the gun go to jail, or does the person committing the crime go to jail? Thank you.
The gun lobby is strong, they are organized, and they are scary. Enough of their tactics. They are buying votes with blood money.
Rosie ODonnell had the audacity to jump on the bandwagon and said that if you own a gun in this country, then you belong in jail. Interesting. One guy saw right through her hypocrisy and put blaming guns for Columbine is like blaming spoons for Rosie ODonnell being fat on the back of his van. Well, Rosie, Maybe we should have a spoon ban.
Blaming guns for Columbine is like blaming spoons for Rosie O'Donnell being fat.
Just to be fair to Rosie, she did admit and correct her wrong.
Some of my comments, in retrospect, seem a little outlandish, like the day after Columbine when I said, anyone who has a gun should go to jail. I was afraid that children were being killed every day.
So you would take that back?
Yes.
Good for you, Rosie. Look who else is on the bandwagon. The United Nations. Look what they're trying to do. They're trying to indoctrinate the American people by saying, hey, we need to get rid of the guns to have the peace. So I did my homework. I noticed on the outside of the UN in New York, they have a gun with the nozzle tied in a knot at the end. Then I said to myself, whoa, why do they have security guards with guns? And then I noticed they keep national peace and world peace with tanks, mortars, missiles, bombs, and armies with machine guns. And they want us to pull down our means of defense? I think not. How about the United Nations drops theirs first? Thomas Jefferson was right when he said, no free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. In the 1700s, George Mason rightly said, to disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. Did you know that where guns are made mandatory, crime plummets? That means where communities own guns or a means to defend themselves, crime goes away. In 1982, the town of Kennesaw, Georgia, passed a law requiring all able adults, except convicts that is, to have a gun. They have had only one murder from an outstate criminal with a gun and have had no increase in crime or violence in 12 years. They also interviewed some of the prisoners in a jail a few miles away from Kennesaw. Guess what the prisoners said? Stay away from Kennesaw. They are an armed people. Common sense. Now, for those who are for disarming the American people, I would say this. You need to wake up and smell the coffee. Criminals never apply for permits. They're not asking anybody for permission.
I'm not worried about the government saying that I can't carry a gun. I'm going to carry a gun anyway.
Here's some food for thought. Why is your government, while in a state of terror, asking you to give up your arms and your means to defend yourselves? Never trust a government that doesn't trust its own people with firearms. Now, I want you to hear it straight from former U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno. Listen to what she had to say. Waiting periods are only a step. Registration is only a step. Prohibition of firearms is the goal. Folks, there's definitely an agenda to try and disarm the American people. For over 200 years, we have been an armed nation, and now all of a sudden it's wrong and unconstitutional. To ensure security for the people is to make sure that they are secure by defending themselves. You empower them, not disarm them. And that's how it's always been in this country. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is what they are trying to indoctrinate the American people with. Annie Hendrick and Sally Skidmore are two women in their 80s who were beaten in their homes, and this is two more reasons, if needed, as to why vulnerable householders might have a right to defend themselves against violent intruders. Again, keep in mind that criminals do not apply for gun permits. And of course, we all know this is not about crime. They recently disarmed the people of England, and with that, the elderly are becoming the target of criminals. Crime is also skyrocketing. Why? Because disarmed citizens are an open prey. In Britain, it got so bad that at one point, one lady was robbed so many times that she took chicken wire and put it around her house. She was taken to court by the government, and the judge told her, you need to remove the chicken wire lest you hurt one of the intruders. That's the kind of mentality the American press is trying to put on the American people. Gun control is not about guns, it's about control. If you don't know your history, you might want to go back and learn what history has to teach you. Every time a nation is disarmed, there is massive genocide. Just ask Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin. Then you will know why a government wants to disarm its own people. One time, a lady was walking down the street, and she had a button on her shirt that said, "Proudly disarmed." Lady, what are you telling a criminal? I walked into Shoney's in Missouri a few years ago, and there was a sign stating, "No guns allowed." I walked inside and asked the lady working there, "Do you have any idea what you're telling criminals?" She said, "Yes." "Rob me." I said, "That's exactly what you're telling a criminal." You see, your Second Amendment declares a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And again, that is your Second Amendment, and forget it not. According to the federal statute, Title 10, Chapter 13, Section 311A, all males between the ages of 17 and 45 who are citizens of the United States or have declared their intent to become citizens are members of the unorganized or reserve militia. In 1996, the Australian government forced the country's gun owners to surrender 640,381 personal firearms, which were subsequently destroyed, costing the government more than $500 million. In the first 12 months, homicides increased 3.2%. Assaults increased 8.6%. Armed robberies increased 44%. In the state of Victoria, homicides with firearms increased 300%. In 1911, Turkey established gun control. From 1915 to 1917, 1.5 million Armenians, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. In 1929, the Soviet Union established gun control. From 1929 to 1953, about 20 million dissidents, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Germany established gun control in 1928, and from 1939 to 1945, 13 million Jews and others who were unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Guatemala established gun control in 1964. From 1964 to 1981, 100,000 Mayan Indians unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Uganda established gun control in 1970. From 1971 to 1979, 300,000 Christians unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Cambodia established gun control in 1956. From 1975 to 1977, 1 million educated people unable to defend themselves were rounded up and, you got it, exterminated. Defenseless people rounded up and exterminated in the 20th century because of gun control, 56 million people. The next time someone talks in favor of gun control, ask them, who do you want to round up and exterminate? With guns, we are citizens. Without them, we are subjects.
Subjects? But subjects to who? There are some who believe that that can't happen in America.
Today in New Orleans, they got a lot tougher on the holdouts.
Police department, go home!
Not only the flooded areas, but New Orleans' driest and wealthiest neighborhoods, too.
Police department!
The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house, sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn, and instructions to disarm anyone inside. Residents were handcuffed on the ground. In the end, police took their weapons but let them stay in their homes.
They were a little bit threatened because our weapons were bigger than their weapons.
Please open the door. They had AR-15s or M16s. They were pointing at us.
They told us, put your hands up in the air. Let us see your hands.
They're drawing down on me, and they let the looters run rampant for over a week? Are you kidding me?
I really thought they were going to kill me. I really did.
They didn't care what your rights were. They were going to deny them.
You're letting the thugs get away with everything, and you're coming to honest, good citizens and taking away their protection, and it is wrong. Wrong. Wrong.
But still, the order had been given for police and National Guard to go house to house, often with guns drawn, to evacuate residents and confiscate their firearms.
And no one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
It was a human drama with emotions and tensions running high. Patty Connie is still trying to recover physically and emotionally.
They really did a number on me.
From the day police forced her from her home.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. And they said, let us in.
Patty tried to explain. She was on dry land, she had plenty of food and water, and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter.
If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, it's not even loaded. And I dropped it on the floor. Well, they punched me in the face. How could this happen in America?
You're treated like a criminal, and you did nothing wrong. So your rights are out the window.
Richard Styron was in his friend's bass boat trying to salvage his gun collection before the looters stole it when they got stopped by a St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's boat.
And we've had policemen tell us that that's what they wanted us to do, but not the sheriff in St. Tammany. They just wanted to confiscate them from us.
We felt like criminals at the time when they come up to us with M16s or AR-15s, whatever it was, but there was 4 of them with rifles and holding on us.
He said, be thankful we're taking your guns here. Well, why should I be thankful? Well, if they catch you with them on land, they're going to take you straight to jail. They took something from you. They stole something from you. That's the only way to put it. They took something that they didn't have a right to take.
The more I think about it, the madder I get.
Jim Richard's home was badly damaged by Katrina, but when he tried to save his gun collection,
Had most of them stored up top.
it too was confiscated by law enforcement.
You know, they had no jurisdiction here. You know, I'm a law-abiding citizen, protecting myself, you know, and property. Yeah, they had no right to take them.
But the authorities didn't stop there. Robert Zoss was forced to evacuate when a tree destroyed both of his family's homes.
These cops came out of nowhere, said stop, and asked, do we have weapons in the car? And I told him, yeah, I do. He said, get out the vehicle, had us all sit cross-legged in front while they searched the vehicle.
But Robert couldn't believe what he watched police do next to his rifle and his friend's pearl-handle revolver.
I saw them smash her gun given to her by grandmother, grandfather, just against the curb. The other things that they busted up, the .22 rifle they busted up, these were police officers.
911 wasn't answering the phone. Our police department wasn't answering the phone. You couldn't find a policeman.
They had no police and military presence in this neighborhood whatsoever.
There was so much gunfire around here at nighttime you could smell it in your nose and taste it in your taste buds.
The post-Katrina world turned right and wrong on its head. Looters ruled this city for over a week post-storm without fear of law enforcement.
Your rights were just done away with.
Buell Teal, a commercial crabber, was asked by emergency personnel to help find a safe water route for a barge carrying supplies to get into New Orleans. Then suddenly, a sheriff's boat with 5 officers on board, armed with automatic rifles, sped towards them.
And they didn't just have them pointed from their hip, they had them up at their shoulder, and asked if we had any weapons on board. I told them yes, we had 2 weapons. They said, get at the back of the boat with your hands in the air. We're coming aboard to search.
Search and then seize Buell's firearms. And when Buell asked for a receipt, the officers flatly refused.
You got a Second Amendment law on the books, and it's just total disregard for it. They violated my rights as far as search and seizure. They had no search warrant.
As we see, this is an open disregard for your civil rights.
War has been declared on the Second Amendment. War has been declared on the entire Bill of Rights, but we've always known, and our founders warned us, that when they come to the guns, you know your nation is in dire peril. That's why the founders called for gun control, and that's why I'm now endorsing it. No, not gun control over the people, who are the source of liberty and justice, and wherever firearms are found, evil is restrained, as Thomas Jefferson said. No, I'm calling for government and the illegal standing army that is Homeland Security, a fifth branch of the military that admits its mission is to suppress gun owners, conservatives, libertarians, returning veterans, Christians. This is the globalist corporate takeover army. And they've used the fake pretext of terrorism to set this up. And now they're telling us, forget about Al-Qaeda. The new terrorists are domestic conservative gun owners who won't turn their guns in. They want to have a civil war in this country. That's their smokescreen to have a purge. And so I am calling for the standing army that is Homeland Security and the thousands of armored vehicles, the tanks, the helicopters, the 2 billion rounds of ammunition to be handed over to the Department of Defense, who has been very resistant in the last 20 years towards the RAND Corporation and the globalist commands to become a domestic military. Everything the system has done is to condition us to accept this so that the globalists can fully implode the economy and accelerate their social engineering. America is under attack from within and without by the globalists. And I also call for collaborators like Dianne Feinstein, Bloomberg, Michael Moore, John McCain, and others to relinquish their firearms to the local government and to declare that they are giving up their taxpayer-paid-for bodyguards in the case of the senators and people like Mayor Bloomberg, who has more than 15 people on his security detail. These people are unbelievable hypocrites who do not want you to be able to protect your family because they know the Second Amendment has become a beachhead of liberty. And these globalists are desperate that the public not learn of the FBI statistics that are collected from local governments across the United States that conclusively show since 1991, violent crime has dropped 49%. It's going straight down because gun ownership is going straight up. Gun ownership goes up, crime rates go down. It is a fact. And the system is panicking over that Chicago and New York and other places where only the government mafia has firearms are crime-ridden bastions of oppression. Think about it. We see a giant Homeland Security arms buildup, and then we get their terror training manuals, and they announce their new #1 enemy is gun owners and people that won't turn their firearms in. This is an authoritarian takeover. This is an attempt to sell their purge against the American people. That's why we've got to use the First Amendment now like we never have before, or we're going to lose this entire country. The globalists are coming in here testing the waters to see if they can sell the public on a civil war with Homeland Security as a standing army waging war against the American people who value the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and our sacred republic. Now, in a moment, I'll get into their overall battle plan to disarm this once free nation. But first, I wanted to just show you a few of the hundreds and hundreds of clips that are online showing surveillance footage where different gangs of thugs come into businesses, come into homes, come into public places, and attempt to rob and attack the peaceful population, and where citizens stand up as true guardians of liberty and defend themselves and those around them.
Now, in no way are we advocating for people to become vigilantes. Being in a real hostage situation or a robbery is very dangerous and very scary. Criminals have no regard for life or the law. Criminals do not care who they hurt or who they rob, because they can always count on the fact that the victims are unarmed. And the police are always called after the fact, after the crime has been committed. But empowering the people to do what's right is the only way to ensure domestic tranquility.
Not only are the nanny state criminals desperate that you not learn that more guns means less crime, they're also scared of all the local newscasts every day in this country. There's thousands of these videos online showing citizens protecting themselves from vicious robbers, criminals, and rapists. They are scared of the fact that the common sense that we have a responsibility to protect ourselves is beginning to get out there. The globalist mafia wants you to be dependent, wants you to be a victim, wants you to be scared, wants you waiting 15 minutes for the police to arrive, calling 911 instead of protecting yourself. That's what this is all about. Dianne Feinstein, Michael Moore, all of these people that have their own bodyguards are trying to smother the liberty movement. They're trying to shut it down. They know you're waking up to their nanny state tyranny. They know that you're aware of the fact that they have bodyguards. They know that you understand that they work for foreign banks that want to bankrupt and consolidate this country. And that's why they're desperate now to launch a full-out assault on the Second Amendment to destroy this country once and for all. You've seen what the globalist propaganda media spews all day. That if somebody commits a crime with a gun, all gun owners are collectively guilty because of that, and so we all have to be collectively punished. Pure authoritarianism. But if we're going to talk about guilt by association, our founders said, you better keep government small, and even if you do, it's probably going to enslave you. So if gun owners are collectively guilty for what someone else does, isn't government collectively guilty? Our founders warned us about the danger of government. They said, you better keep government tiny and on a short leash, and even if you do, it'll be hard to keep your liberty. George Washington famously said, government is like fire, a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And did you know that if you cut out all the military deaths from the last century's wars and just look at government killing innocent people, lining them up and shooting them, starving them, you name it, it's more than 260 million people killed by government in what is known as democide. And so that is guilt by association. We know government is the #1 threat in world history. And now tyranny has come to America and is telling us we need to turn our guns in. And we've got Dianne Feinstein famously smiling on television and saying, we're going to get our gun control agenda through, if not now, later, because there will be more incidences.
These events are going to continue.
And smiling, oh yes. Isn't it exciting to know how you're going to be able to use those dead children? Ignore the millions of kids killed by government after disarmament and just take those 20 and throw them in everybody's face. And she said she's seen the photos. She has the grisly details. They may release them. And Michael Moore salivates and says, release the photos of the dead kids. Destroy the Second Amendment. Destroy the NRA. While he has bodyguards. And now he's saying Harry Reid wouldn't have voted against taking the guns if he'd have had his grandchildren dead.
If a man with an assault weapon goes into the school where Harry Reid's grandchildren go to school tomorrow and kills his grandchildren, what would he stand in front of that microphone at 5 o'clock and say, I know how Diane, had to witness the mayor getting murdered, but my grandchildren just got killed today, but, we can't get it passed because we just don't have the votes. Would he do that really? I don't think so.
These people are salivating over the few massacres that happen so that they can collectively have us put on that guilt and turn in our firearms when we, the people, have lowered the crime rate with our Second Amendment by 49% and saved countless lives and brought countless criminals to justice. And that's the big secret they don't want you to know about. So the answer in closing is get on the offensive. They're going to guilt us over guns. They're going to register our guns. And every time there's a new event, they're going to call for more restrictions and then confiscations once our guns are registered. And that's what they're pushing through the Senate right now. No more private sales where you can't even give a gun to your son or your daughter, and where they can arrest you claiming you don't have proof of a receipt of a 10-round mag. What's happening is the corrupt power structure is declaring war on gun owners. They're announcing all the different ways they're going to put us in jail for over 10-round mags or not having proof of where we bought a rifle, even though you have no criminal record. And if you were ever on Prozac or ever depressed, your guns are going to be taken. It is a nightmare scenario. If we can't trust the American people to be armed, then we can't trust the government to be armed. In fact, our founders said, trust the people to be armed, don't trust the government to be armed domestically, no standing army. And that's what Homeland Security is a fifth branch of the military operating domestically, and it is cancer. And it staged Fast and Furious as a false flag terror attack to blame the Second Amendment, but by the grace of God, they were exposed. Ladies and gentlemen, history is happening right now. We're winning the Second American Revolution and the info war. That's why the establishment wants to start a civil war by persecuting gun owners. We need to hold our fire in the Second Amendment range. We need to intensify our fire in the First Amendment. Let's work as hard as we can to try to fix this peacefully. Please get this video out to everyone you know. I'm Alex Jones signing off for Infowars.com.
From my cold, dead hands.
They looked into the law, and under Title 10 U.S.C. 311, saw a phenomenon known as the unorganized militia that consists of all people, even the people taking these pictures right here, everyone. And they began to form themselves in units for their own self-defense and their self-preservation. Now, the way we stand now, and it's good that we're getting these youth aired out, because 200 years ago, the British didn't get the hint until they saw dead redcoats out there. This nation was probably one of the most heavily armed forces on Earth. And I have heard more and more people say, if one of these black-suited, armor-wearing, state-sponsored terrorists come kicking down my door, I'm going to blow somebody away. They don't call themselves militia. themselves patriots. They call themselves American citizens who are getting tired of confiscatory tax rates, increasingly legislation, increasingly heavy regulations, which is they believe are leading them down a path to involuntary servitude. And one of the slogans that's been going around, especially in Ohio, is what I've been telling people, for those who think that this is just primarily an angry white male movement, is that if our ancestors would have been armed, they would not have been slaves.
Given most of our freedoms away. And once you've given your freedoms away, they will not be given back. They have to be taken back.